Well, hello, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Here we go. Good to see you guys. So glad that you're here. So today is what, November the 5th, and it's another episode of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. And it just, it's amazing how this world is shifting and twisting and turning and spinning and all those amazing words that we could use to describe the process that we have to go through to wake up from the insanity. Oh, good to see each and every one of you. Mike, good to see you, brother. Oh, so today we are going to, well, let me just mention this. Last week, for whatever reason, I didn't hit the post button to post last week's message of Ascension with A Course in Miracles. That was episode 220. So I saw that today, so I posted that today. And then, of course, this one will get processed today, tonight, and I'll post it tomorrow. So for those of you who look for these recordings, sorry, you didn't get one last week, but you're going to get two this week. So double the fun. And today's episode is 221. And last week we looked at a lesson. And the lesson was recognizing that, the love of God is all there is. That when we are comfortable with the love of God, nothing could be missing. There's just absolutely nothing else that can possibly be missing. And as we look at the world, how things are right now, it is a perfect opportunity. You could even call it the perfect storm to help us see how disconnected we have been from the truth of our beingness. We have been completely, and the way to look at this is two ways, two perspectives. One is God's perspective. And from God's perspective, none of what's happening here is affecting a single one of us. Now, let's put aside all judgments and oh, what do you mean? Look at the wars, look at the hurricanes, look at the elections. Put that aside. And that is one of the tricks that you must learn if you want to wake up. And to wake up is to go on a journey of ascension. Ascension through the layers of consciousness. It's a process by which you are allowing yourself to break through the barriers of limitation in the mind. That's what ascension is. We're ascending, we're moving up in higher levels of consciousness, looking at things from a different perspective. 10 feet, 20 feet, 100 feet, 1,000 feet, 10,000 feet, 100,000 feet, until you're in the infinite perspective, which is God's perspective. From that perspective, nothing is happening. Nothing, zero, nada, silch. We have to get comfortable with that. If you want to wake up, you've got to get comfortable that nothing is happening. Hold that perspective as just as valid, even if you don't fully understand it. Because when we begin to trust something that we can't fully comprehend, that's the beginning of creating a relationship with infinite knowledge, with the divine. That is an opening that is necessary. It's like it punctures a space within our know-it-all mind. It's like a little hole that allows for the light to come in instead of for us to live inside of all of our own personal information and think that that's all there is. That's the truth, which is the trickery of the ego. So this perspective, nothing has ever happened that is going to affect a single one of us. Our souls are the essence of what we are, the energy of what we are, the consciousness that we are, whatever you want to call it. Find the word that makes you feel comfortable with the all that isness is never going to change. It is expanding because it's eternal, but it does not change. It is pure perfection always. That's why there's no time there. There's no beginning and no end to it there, to what it is. It is isness itself. Always has been, always will be. That's the perspective that the Course in Miracles is inviting us to train our minds to one day begin to accept. When we begin to accept it, that begins to make more sense. It seeps into our everyday awareness. And I do it out here because the habit, I guess, we're receiving it. That's how most people think about infinite knowledge. The truth is that it's awakening inside of us. We are remembering it within us. That's actually the truth of it. The other perspective is the perspective of the ego. The ego is what blocks us from the awareness, the remembering that we have access within us to all knowing. Our peace comes from allowing ourselves to accept that truth and live from that truth and experience that truth. So, very simple. There is the all that isness, and then there are the blocks that we have created to it. And the way that the course is laid out, it is training our mind to little by little return ourselves to the awareness of that truth. Very simple. And it's crucial that we keep things extremely simple if we are going to make any progress in this work, in awakening. So, number one, you within you is all knowledge, but it is not the same knowledge of the ego. The ego's knowledge is information that has been provided to us from the external world. And that information creates barriers and blocks to our ability to tap into infinite knowledge. Pretty simple. So think of a room that is absolutely completely empty, but inside of that room you can sit and you can meditate and you have these incredible moments of inspiration. You're accessing all knowledge. And then imagine your life that you start going to school, and every year that you go to school, you fill up a box of knowledge and you bring it into the room and you put it in the room. And then you accumulate 12 years worth of knowledge. And then you go get 4 more years worth of knowledge in college and you put 4 more boxes in there. And then let's say you go for your master's, PhD, you bring in another, 4 to 10 boxes and you put them in there. And then you have your job and your career and you get certifications and you've got to do continuing ed and you keep bringing boxes in. And I haven't even talked about all the boxes that you brought in about religion and all the boxes you brought in about the medical system and all the boxes you brought in about government and how things should function and how politics should work and all the boxes about, well, all those other things that we're supposed to do and be and have. Before you know it, your room is filled with all these boxes of information. Well, that information is what the ego is all about. How much of this information do I know? Who knows more? Who's got more boxes? Our IQ is based on that. But if you really got absolutely honest with yourself, when you fill up the room with all those boxes, it's very hard to meditate and tap into new ideas because you're always going to be looking for information in one of these boxes. Oh, see, I'm right. Here's that information. And then you drag your box to your friend's house and you let them know, see, I'm right. It's all here in the box. This is it. Here's a newspaper from, whatever year, 3 weeks ago. And here's the headline. This is the truth. So the ego is all of the information that we have picked up from the outside, brought inside, because we hold it in our mind. And we use all of that to block our access to infinite knowledge, which is the truth of who we actually are. So the process that the course is taking us on is a journey to train our mind to look at these boxes and say, oh, yeah, I picked this up in third grade. I picked this up in eighth grade. Oh, I got from the church that I went to. This comes from my culture. And you begin to remove those boxes. You say, okay, I know it. Yeah, I had that experience, but I don't need to hold on to it and defend it and protect it like my life depended on it. It's an experience. I had it. You move it out. You create spaciousness again. Because when you remove the ego's knowledge, it's not like the information goes away. It's just that it's not blocking you. It's not in the way of direct access to all knowing that is within you. We got to clear out our mind so that we can tap into infinite knowledge. It's like it's a little small little door in there. Some people can call it an altar, you can call it a window, you can call it a door, it doesn't matter what you call it. There's a space within us where there is a direct connection to all knowing. I used to be one of those people, like pretty much everybody else, I'm sure everyone here can relate, where I needed to be right. I was right. And I was very righteous about what I was right about. Even if I did not know the ultimate truth about anything, which I couldn't, it's not possible for anybody to know ultimate truth about anything. But I defended what I knew, like my life depended on it. And thankfully, I have matured. I'm still maturing, I should say. And I came to the place of realizing I not only do I not want to know it all, because I'd be lying to myself if I thought that I knew all of it, but I have given up in trying to know it all. Because what I do know, without a doubt, is that I have access to all knowing when I move out of thinking I know it. I know it's kind of like a tongue twister. But in the place, this is why paradoxes are so important on this journey, in the space of allowing yourself to trust that you have access to infinite knowledge, you don't need to store information. You don't need to hold on to it. As a matter of fact, as I just said, putting all those boxes into your mental space is to create blocks to accessing the knowledge that is available to each and every one of us. The course is designed to train our mind to look at those obstacles, to look at the things that we think that we know that get in the way from accessing God's knowledge. Because God's knowledge is very simple. There's nothing ambiguous about. Course in Miracles is so clear. As a matter of fact, the course is so clear that it's fascinating to hear teachers of the course share their perspective on the course, which obviously is what I do. But when I listen to somebody share their perspective about the course and they're making the outer world real, the whole point of the course is being missed. Not that it's wrong, it's just showing the level of consciousness that that person is at. I have found that understanding the course becomes a lot easier if you give yourself some grace. If you let yourself admit to yourself, I don't know what I don't know. And we enter into the course with a curiosity that allows us to take what is given to us and begin to cultivate not only a trust in what it is saying, but eventually as we have found is one of the characteristics of a teacher of God, one who embodies what the course is all about, is we will cultivate faithfulness. Faithfulness is you have faith in one source, one truth. Ultimately, it's God. You trust, you learn to trust that God is the only source. So then faithfulness is that that is the only source you go to. We have so many lessons in the course, so many things in the course that let us know that the only way for us to be happy is if we allow ourselves to be sustained by the love of God, which is what last week's lesson was about. And we also have lessons that tell us, lesson 76, I am under no laws but God's. And when you understand that the entire purpose of awakening is to align strictly, solely, only with God's way, that is what Jesus was teaching us 2,000 years ago. He was telling us that he was the way to God because he found the way within himself. So he was just pointing to the way. Not that he was the only one who could do that and he needed to be the only teacher. He was a teacher of how he did it, giving us A Course in Miracles so that we can then learn how to do it ourselves. Because nobody can take you back inside except for yourself. And that's the power of the Course in Miracles. It is a self-study course. You have to do it by yourself. It's only going to work if you sit with it and receive what is in there and accept it as your own. Yes, having groups, that's why I have the Awareness Academy, because I wanted to create a place where people could come together to study the course. But we break it down by what it says. And I may share experiences. How did I make sense of that? But we accept it word for word. If you don't, then the ego is putting up blocks to you receiving full knowledge from God. And the only reason the ego does that is once you go to God, you don't have an ego. You don't need the ego. Ego is beliefs. That's all that the ego is. You're never going to have surgery to remove your ego. That's not going to happen because it's not anywhere. It is actually nothing. It is no thing. But because you believe it, because you have thoughts that say that block God, thoughts that have you believe fear is real, or thoughts that make you think that you know better, then that is what the ego is. But you move into the space where you are clear about who you are, like Jesus walked upon this planet 2,000 years ago, and many others have done that, where you don't feel ego, you don't hear ego, because that's not what's speaking. What's speaking is the voice of God within has an opening to speak directly to us. It does not need to be distracted or sidetracked with other information and quoting this, that, or the other. It's Course in Miracles. I have found it is an absolute direct path to liberation, but you have to trust it 100%. Just trusting it 80%, 99% is still to allow the voice that distracts us from the truth to be present. It's to say, this is true, but a perfect example is the woman who channeled the course. Her name is Helen Schuckman. She's no longer on this physical plane. But she was interviewed, and in the interview, the interviewer said to her, "Do you believe what came through you? Do you believe everything that you wrote?" And here's what she says: "I know it's true, but I don't believe it." Listen to that statement, how convoluted that is. She knew it was true. I know a lot of people say, yes, this is the truth in the Course in Miracles, but she didn't believe it because she hadn't trained her mind to accept it so that she could make what it says the beliefs that she operates from. And to believe something like the Course is to accept those teachings, to accept those lessons. When the Course tells us, I am under no laws but God's, and you believe, yeah, that's true. I'm under no laws but God's. And actually, it is true with a capital T, because we're all under God's laws. We're all inside the mind of God, every one of us. It is totally safe inside the mind of God. So it is true. But then we get hurt and we go to the doctor, or we get upset and we have to go to the police and find somebody to protect us, or we vote for the president that is going to make sure that we have, they lower our taxes, and then they do the things that give us more benefits, more whatever, because I'm going to be safer if they let me have more of my own money. So just that alone is craziness, but we think these things. So you can say all day long, you can recite, I am under no laws but God's, and trust that it is true, and then believe that you have to do something else except be under no laws but God's. Because it takes a while to train the mind into complete alignment so that thought, belief, and action are one, which is another characteristic of a teacher of God: honesty. And honesty means you're consistently operating under God's laws. Do I do it consistently all the time? Absolutely not. I am still working my way through this world, but I know for me, I am more on the side of trusting and believing than I am on the side of trusting it is true, but still operating in my ego mind. I look at this like a seesaw. When we are little, we are totally and completely, I'll grab a ruler to make the point. it's like we're totally, completely, God is ruling. We're listening to the voice for God because we don't have all that information. We haven't filled up our mind with all those boxes of information. When you're little, you don't have all that information. And here's the ego. And little by little, life happens. We fill up our mind with all those boxes. And before we know it, those boxes block us from listening to God and we're listening to the ego. Now, I know for me, I am well past the 50% mark. I listen to God more than I listen to my ego. I operate more from my godly knowledge than I do my egoic knowingness. However, I'm still in the world, so I'm navigating the world with egos, so I get that. I get that I'm playing the egoic game, but I go to God for my information more than I go to my ego mind. So it's always going to happen in tandem. If you're listening to God 90%, you're listening to the ego 10. If you're listening to God 60%, you're listening to the ego 40. If you're listening to God 20%, you're listening to the ego 80. When you get that, that's what honesty is all about. How consistent are you in listening to God and not the ego? That's the goal. But honesty means, oh, I'm 50-50. I'm somewhere here in the middle. I trust the laws of God. I trust that I am in the mind of God, that all of this is made up. I don't have to convince myself that everything is pure consciousness. I don't have to convince myself of that anymore. I know that it is. Now I'm just maneuvering the egos that are here, but I'm not taking it seriously. I'm not losing my peace. I'm staying in my calm, in my serenity, and I'm just playing the game. Well, if you get to 50-50, you can play the game without a whole lot of disturbance. And then you continue to do the work of staying more in your peace and less in the disturbance. So, what we're going to look at today is inside of the text. It is chapter 8 in the text. Is called The Journey Back. And as I was sitting this morning and asking, okay, we completed a lesson last week. What are we going to do today? This jumped out at me because it's so important that we understand where the curriculum is taking us. Section number 1 that we're going to look at is called the direction of the curriculum. There are so many people out there speaking spiritual, beautiful spiritual truths, but without a lot of guidance into how to train your mind to remain with God. It is one thing when the ego takes all that beautiful spiritual information, which is what religion has done primarily. Dogma is nothing more than egos took spiritual information and they're beating everybody up with it. If you don't believe this, you're going to go to hell. If you don't do it this way, you're going to get in trouble. If you don't follow these rules, if you don't bow this way, if you don't do this, that, or the other, then you're doing it wrong. That's not those are not God's laws, because God's laws are very simple. We're all created equal. We're all free. We all have free will, and we never can be hurt. The truth of who we are, the essence that we are, call it the soul, the spirit that we are, is never going to be affected. So where do all of our fears come from? Because we've created an association with our body as being what is real. And then we worship other bodies that notice how, we've been conditioned to believe that if somebody has robes and big hats and whatever, that they're somehow more important. Hello, can you say Halloween? It costumes. Costumes don't mean that somebody knows more than you. So we have to train our minds to take people off of these pedestals that we have put them in and realize that all of that information that we have given us or that have been given to us are those boxes that block us from being able to have that direct access to the creator. But we all have that access. So we have to understand that there is a very specific way. That's why in the introduction to the Course in Miracles, it says that this is a required course. And what is required is not that the Course in Miracles is the only way to get us to that, but it is required that you understand the way the mind works. And you can understand the way the mind works. Heck, the Buddha did that 800 years ago. He didn't have a Course in Miracles. So how did that happen? Well, because it is required that you understand the way the mind works. And of course, all of Buddhism was created from the Buddha pointing the way, just as Jesus did, pointing the way to how he unraveled the insanity from within his mind. It didn't quite get him to that connection with God like Jesus did. But do you realize that Jesus, actually Buddha was long before that, like 500 years before Jesus. So I said 800 years, that's not accurate. Jesus, if you pay attention to those scholars who really understood what was going on, who looked between the lines, not just what the Bible says, or you listen to some channeled information and get that message directly from Jesus, guess where Jesus was studying? This Jew that Jesus was, not a Christian, he didn't come here to create a religion, but this Jewish person, Jewish information, was studying with the masters of the Far East. And he is studying how to train his mind. So what was he then teaching? He was teaching the way that he learned to move beyond the thinking of the egoic mind, sort out through all those boxes of information, and come to the place of pure alignment with God within. The kingdom of heaven is within. So, because his message was distorted 2,000 years ago, 2,000 years later, he proceeds to come through Helen Schuckman to give us additional information, to break it down, to put it so simply and concise in one book to help us understand that we have to train our mind. So the direction of the curriculum is to take us through all of the blocks that we have accepted, information that we have picked up from other egos, move those aside, ideally, remove as much as possible, and find the doorway to that connection with God, which is easy to find once you remove all the obstacles. So the journey back. This is a journey back to the truth of who you are. We all come from pure consciousness, expanded, highest frequency that can be, one with God. We're in the mind of God, so we are the frequency of God. If you're in the mind of something, you're going to be the frequency of that. You cannot not be anything else. So from that frequency of all knowingness, of all oneness, of all recognition that we are connected, that there cannot be anything that is not, we little by little begin to descend in frequency. We pick up information, and the information brings us further and further and further and further away from the truth, because that information becomes what we prize. And then we begin to abide by the rules and the laws and the regulations of the outside. And all of that makes us forget the truth that is true always and can only be found inside. So the journey back is a journey. It's the reversal. It's deconstructing what the ego constructed. And there's only one way to do that. And that is through the exercises, the lessons that are provided to us in the course that point to exactly what we need to be looking at again and again and again and again until we have removed those layers. So let's go into paragraph number 1, the direction of the curriculum. And it starts with sentence number 1. Knowledge is not the motivation for learning this course. Again, that's what we're trying to get rid of, is all this egoic knowledge. Peace is. When you're clear that what we're moving to is to feel the peace that passes all understanding, then you begin to recognize we're not trying to accumulate more knowledge, because that would defeat the purpose of the journey back. The purpose of the journey back is to let go of knowledge, to question what you think is true and make a decision. Does this align with God or not? Sentence number 3 says, this is the prerequisite for knowledge only because those who are in conflict are not peaceful. If you are believing to masters, you're going to be in conflict. This is why we have been given free will. And in the free will that we have, we can do anything that we want to do, but there's only one thing we cannot do, is to worship two masters. Meaning it's going to be love or it's going to be fear, it's going to be God or it's going to be ego, it's going to be truth or it's going to be lies. That's it. Pretty simple. I mean, that's a big thing that we've been given. Free will to believe anything except to believe two things at the same time. Now, you can believe two things at different times. So one time I believe God, like Helen Schuckman said, yeah, I know it's true. So she believed what God was saying. She knew it was true. And the other moment, no, but I don't believe it because she's listening to the voice of the ego that is arguing with that information. So and again, here, Paul, I know you just joined us. We're in chapter 8 in the text, and we are in section number 1, the direction of the curriculum. In my book, it's page 138. So in paragraph 1, in
Thank you.
of course, in sentence number 3, so this is a prerequisite for knowledge only because those who are in conflict are not peaceful. And peace is the condition of knowledge because it is the condition of the kingdom. So the word knowledge here means to get to the place of all knowing. However, we are going to sort through information. The information is what we're letting go of. So we're not trying to accumulate more knowledge as the ego understands it, which is information. We're letting go of information that when we are left in that emptiness, that's when we realize, oh, this is what knowledge is. Because that is when, in that peaceful place, in that peace that passes all understanding, all knowing begins to be available to us because we, not that it wasn't before, but now we're present to trusting that we can access it. Sentence number 4 says, knowledge can be restored only when you meet its conditions. This is not a bargain made by God who makes no bargains. Isn't it wonderful to know that God is absolutely certain, consistent, reliable at all times, no matter what? God is. It is. Truth is. Such a beautiful thing. This is why, for me, I had a really hard time growing up Catholic, believing the Bible. I was like, this stuff is, well, first of all, I never saw a Bible really. Growing up, we didn't have Bibles in my Catholic home. The only Bible that we had is I went to Catholic schools, and then we would have to recite things, and then I would have to read certain things from the Bible. Except for when we went to Mass, because everything was in Latin. Heck, I not only could I not read Latin, but I didn't even understand what they were saying. So usually going to Catholic Mass was just opportunity for an hour nap because that stuff put me to sleep. However, when I began to come to know what God really is, there are no bargains. God is consistent. No matter who comes to the Course in Miracles, they're going to read the exact same thing. They're going to get the exact same message. But no matter who you go to in the Catholic Church, you're going to get different people's opinions. Not only that, you get to the Bible, and the Bible tells you about a loving God, which is what Jesus talks about. All those, red letters tell us about this loving God. And then you read the other parts of the Bible that tell you about this wrathful God. And to me, that never made sense. How can a loving God punish you, turn you into pillars of salt, or ask for the sacrifice of your firstborn child? That made no sense to me. Well, as we're raising our consciousness, that which is nonsensical makes no sense. So the higher we go in consciousness, the more percentage we are accepting the truth of God. The other stuff is information that we just disregarded. You can see it for what it is, and it doesn't affect your ability to come to the place where you're accessing true knowledge, which is where the truth that you cannot bargain with is found, and everybody's going to find the exact same truth. This is why when we're all um, clear about what God is, we are not going to have issues with each other. We are going to be in total unity. The only reason we have issues around God is because humans, in their egos, have created their interpretation about what God is, and we are fighting each other based on our interpretations about God, not on what God is, if we haven't felt it. So we're arguing about the boxes of information in the room and not in the spaciousness that is experienced when you get all that information out of the way, which is very hard for the ego to do because the ego is always right about what it knows, not comfortable at all in not knowing, but is in not knowing that we come to all knowing. Again, paradoxes. Isn't that fascinating? I just love paradoxes. It used to be confusing as hell in the beginning. What? I would think about this makes no sense. And then I realized that the ego would tell me that what was true made no sense so that I would not make sense of it. But once I began to accept the truth and I began to see how logical it was and I began to make sense of it, then the ego became nonsense. So just it's kind of a fun thing. Sentence number 6. It is merely the result of your misuse of his laws on behalf of an imaginary will that is not his. The imaginary will is the ego, attempting for us to be other than how God created us. Knowledge is his will. If you are opposing his will, how can you have knowledge? So the ego, again, is all the boxes of information that we bring to the room. The empty space is God's knowledge. You cannot access God's knowledge if you fill up the room with boxes of ego information. Does that analogy make sense? Hopefully, it paints a picture. So the work that we're doing is removing all those boxes of misguided information. It's all made up, but it provides the perception of information. And because we have all agreed to it, because we have participated in mass consciousness agreements that this is the right religion, or that this is the right political group, or that this is the right way to deal with, medical things. Think about it this way. And this was one of the things that helped me really begin to open up my eyes. If truth is truth and it is good for you and it is a fact, do you need a law to implement it? If it's good for you and it is true, do you need a law? Do we need a law to tell people to breathe? Breathing is good for you. So why do we have to have laws that tell us that we have to do things that we don't want to do, that don't feel right for us, that don't feel appropriate for us? Why is that? And every time that we do something that doesn't feel right, we are doing it against our will. Doesn't all that defy what God has created, free beings? So who makes up these rules and laws and regulations and religious dogma that has to be followed when our own internal guidance system tells us, no, this doesn't feel right? If we were in touch with the truth of who we are, we wouldn't need anything external. This is why the lesson in the course that says, I am under no laws but God's, is only for someone who has emptied their mind of egoic information and has come to the place where you feel the guidance. And do you realize that our internal guidance system, it's like our little GPS within, is very simple, very, very simple. You feel peaceful, you're on the right track. You feel tension, you're doing something you shouldn't be doing. You feel peaceful, you're listening to God. You feel conflict, you're listening to ego. Very simple. And if all of us were trained from the beginning, not even trained from the beginning, but not trained out of the truth of who we are by filling our minds with all kinds of misinformation, we would all be listening to that guidance system and we would all be doing what feels good. And if we need a lesson and we touch the stove and we get burnt, that one bit of ouchie will make you stop doing that. You don't need a law to tell you don't touch the stove. But yet, humanity is so controlled by so many rules and laws and regulations. I was looking at something the other day. Let me see if I think I saved it because I thought, oh my gosh, this is just so funny. But let me read this to you. It's a little visual. You see that person and then a long list of things, but it says 125 years ago, you didn't have to ask permission from the government to collect rainwater. There are states that ban the collection of rainwater. You have to have a special permit, special circumstances to catch rainwater. A license to go fishing, a license, get permission to own a property, to start a business, to build a home, to get married, to hunt, to own a weapon, to cut hair, to sell a product, to protest, to sell food. There's so many things you cannot do without having to go get somebody to give you a permit for it. Now we could say, well, some of these things, we want hunting licenses so that we don't over hunt a particular pond. If you follow your guidance system and you go there and there's no fish, you're not going to be fishing. Then you'll know, okay, the fish are going to have to reproduce themselves so we can fish again. Why do we need a license? Why do we need somebody who controls what you're doing? There's just so many things that the course wants us to open our eyes to recognize that when you're listening to the guidance from within, there will be no conflict. There'll be an automatic connection. Why? Because all minds are joined. And when we join our minds in the knowingness of the truth of who we are, there is a level of respect that is automatic. We were just reading that yesterday in one of our classes. Paula, do you remember we were talking about when you come to the place that you respect yourself, you acknowledge your worth? And when you respect yourself and you know your worth as God created you, you know everybody else is worthy. You're not going to take more fish than you need. But why is it that we have to learn these things? Because we have moved so far away from the truth of who we are that we have to train our minds to get back to the remembering of the truth of who we are so that we can tap into this knowledge, and it will be the same for everybody. And from that place where we tap into the same knowledge, we are going to coexist beautifully, because what begins to happen in a space of peace is collaboration and co-creation and respect and the acknowledgement of well-being for all, the recognition of abundance when everybody only takes what they need, not more than that. And in that space of recognizing that we are all brothers and sisters, peace on earth is automatic because we have found peace within our hearts. So as it says in here, if you're opposing, sentence 8, if you're opposing his will, how can you have knowledge? If we're following all these laws that are man-made, how can we know the laws of God? Sentence number 9 says, I have told you what knowledge offers you, but perhaps you do not yet regard this as wholly desirable. If you did, you would not be so ready to throw it away when the ego asks for your allegiance. Whew. Paragraph 2. The distractions of the ego may seem to interfere with your learning, but the ego has no power to distract you unless you give it the power to do so. Very simply put, if you take the lesson that says, I am under no laws but God's, and you read it and you believe that it is true, you will not let the ego distract you into thinking you got to go outside of yourself for healing. You got to go outside of yourself for safety. You got to go outside of yourself for peace, for companionship. Those are all egoic distractions from the truth of who we are. Because when we tap into the knowledge of the power that we are powerful beyond measure. When we go within, we take out all that information that tells us that we have to go outside, and we sit with God. We begin to experience true knowledge. Healing comes from that place. Healing comes from a recognition that who we are, what we are, is whole, perfect, and complete. As a matter of fact, dis-ease is because we have not been at ease in the truth of who we are, in our alignment with God. And of course, the mind who is believing in the ego, back to my little ruler, if we're believing what the ego is saying and we're listening to the ego, and that is our master. Now, let's say we're 80% believing, well, yes, we've got to get all these shots so that we prevent these diseases, and we've got to take all these pills to prevent all of these things. And only these pills are going to cure us, and only these shots are going to cure us. You're not listening to God. So you cannot have the inner healing because now you're relying on external solutions that are only going to provide the opportunity to make the effect a little bit better, but it doesn't deal with the cause. The cause is only cured when you go to God and you accept that you are all perfect as God created you. Again, it's a paradox. God created you perfect, but your belief that there's something wrong with you overrides your experience of your perfection. It doesn't override what God created. What God created cannot be overridden. As it says in here, God makes no bargains, but you can have an experience. That's what you need to understand about will. God created you perfect, but you can will yourself to be imperfect all by the flip of the switch. Am I listening to God? Am I listening to ego? When you learn to master the seesaw and you decide to not be listening to the ego, you decide that the voice for God is the voice of truth and the only voice that you're going to be under its laws, then comes the journey of facing all of the fears that are going to come up when you begin to decide to not listen to the information that has been provided to you by, all the lovely people in this world. When you decide, nope, I'm under no laws but God's, a lot of people are not going to like that. You might even get in trouble. You might even get put in jail. You might even get crucified. Imagine that. But are you willing to be one who says, give me liberty or give me death? You can take my body. I am not dying anyways. Yeah, the body won't be here, so I'll pick up another one. I'll come back with a newer model. Laina 2.0. Well, hopefully it's not Laina anymore. But anyways, if you, not if, when we accept ourselves as God created us, we can't bargain with the ego anymore. But while we're listening to the ego, we can't listen to God, especially when they're this far apart. When we're listening to this voice, we can't hear that one. If you walk into a room that's crowded, you can't feel barely enough room to breathe. Got to take out those boxes, got to remove all that old information. And the only way to remove it is to have it be something that you recognize as an obstacle. Typically that happens as an irritation, as a something that aggravates you. Then you can go, okay, this irritation is an invitation to see my ego's motivation, but also to see God's motivation. What's God's motivation? God's motivation is that you acknowledge you are powerful. That's all God wants us to do. Acknowledge that we're powerful, because when we recognize that we're powerful and where the power comes from, that God gave it to us, for a little while we might misuse that power. And many have. Many who have become rulers in this world have misused that power. But when you begin to feel the peace of God, you begin to move more and more deeper and deeper into that space that recognizes that we are one. From that place, love, gentleness, kindness is normal, absolutely normal. Sentence number 2 says in paragraph 2, the ego's voice is an hallucination. It's made up. It's totally made up. You cannot expect it to say, I am not real. Yet, you are not asked to dispel your hallucinations alone. You are merely asked to evaluate them in terms of their results to you. If you do not want them on the basis of loss of peace, they will be removed from your mind for you. The world today is in a state of utter confusion because we keep going to the same people that have contributed to the misinformation that we have been buying into, asking them to make things better, asking them to make things equal, asking them to make things healthy, when they're not interested in that. The ego has two things that it is interested in money and power. And power doesn't mean just power to be the CEO of a company that can sell you all kinds of useless products. Not just that. Power can be a victim and not have to take responsibility for anything. Power can be to be a bully. Power can be to be a victim. Power is to do whatever the heck the ego wants to do. And if it has money, and here's the funny thing, because the ego worships money, it also worships the lack of it. Because if I can be poor and if I can have nothing, then I can feel powerful, even more powerful as a victim. Those two things are always intertwined. Oh, I can't get anything done because I don't have any money. Oh, I'm so, powerless because I can't get anything done. Well, you're using your power to deny that you are powerful, which is okay. Totally okay. God doesn't punish anybody. That's a beautiful thing again. God has zero agenda, no agenda whatsoever. It's like we've been given the power to go off and do whatever you want to do and then come back home like the prodigal child that we all are. Come back home and we're going to have a big old party. And tell us about your adventures. Was it fun? Do you want to do it again? Did you enjoy being poor? Did you enjoy being rich? Go back and do it again. And then come back and tell me all about it. That's just the way our heavenly, benevolent Father, Mother, God looks at us. Waking up is to say, why do I keep doing this? I rather operate in awareness of the truth of who I am. This is what moving to the fifth dimension is all about. Instead of playing in the playground of the third dimension where we come in and everything is, ego runs the show because that's what it's for. I want to play in the playground where I am aware that I'm going to take on a separate body vessel. And in that separate body vessel, I get to experience the world according to God's laws. All power is within me, all power is within you. All minds are joined. So we are operating with telepathy. We can understand and know what everybody is thinking. There are no secrets, pure transparency, and then we get to create. Oh, I want to be a scientist, or I want to be a teacher, or I want to be a doctor, or I want to be a fisherman. We're not going to have rules and laws and regulations for people who are already respecting one another, respecting the worth of each other. Then we're going to be in collaboration and co-creation. Guess what we're not going to have in that kind of a world that the course calls a happy dream. We're not going to have police to deal with issues because who's going to have issues when you're respecting one another? We're not going to have courts to decide because we're not going to have police to take us in to have to figure out what the judge is going to say about who's right and who's wrong. That's not going to be part of it. We're not going to have governments who are telling us what the laws are going to be. We're going to have representatives who are going to ensure that things operate smoothly for the greater good of all. One of the things that I love that is brilliant are traffic signals. They're brilliant. Nobody would argue really with that. Maybe a few people who might speed by them, but it's a wonderful thing. That is wonderful leadership that takes a great idea that services everybody else. But then what is not good? Ooh, let's catch the people who are speeding through these lights. Let's put a camera in here. And it doesn't matter if they pass, just a little bit. We're going to make them miserable because we're going to charge them $100. Well, that's where the ego begins to start doing things that is selfish. Again, money. Oh, I got power. I'm the police, and I get to put that speeding light, whatever it is, that monitor. And then what happens? Other people who say, "Well, let's make some money from the traffic, whatever, I can't remember what you call those, where the traffic guns where you can see if there's a policeman ahead. So we're going to make money off of not getting caught by the people who are trying to make money because we're speeding." And that insanity just perpetuates people cheating and lying and trying to get, what's best for me. Because, of course, the ego is always selfish. It's all about me, service to self. But when we operate in collaboration, cooperation, and co-creation, none of that is necessary. So the world that is crumbling is a world that is falling under the weight of its own greed and selfishness. And there is a whole new world that has been forming small groups. We used to call them, crazy people, and often lived in communes or did things off grid or whatever. Now that's becoming popular. That's becoming something that looks interesting. Land and grow your own food and not have laws that say you got to put this pesticide on there and kill this and kill that and poison the people that eat that food. So it's becoming extremely clear that those who are listening to the voice within are living much simpler, joyful, peaceful lives, and they're willing to share with others because it's not just about the money. And those who continue to listen to the ego, who want somebody to take care of them, look, I hope you guys read my newsletter about, when the government falls, God's still there. So maybe it's a good thing that the government is falling, that the systems are crumbling, that relying on somebody else to take care of you. I am all for helping each other temporarily until we get on our feet because it is natural to want to be self-sufficient. But I am absolutely, completely not in favor whatsoever of anything that provides permanent sustenance, because what it does is it fosters this victim mentality. I can't go work and do it on my own, so I need somebody else to take care of me. And guess what happens? I got to find somebody else who's going to take care of me. Somebody else is going to be my victim while I'm the victim of the system. So we've got to understand the repercussions of really looking at every belief that we hold so that we can peel back everything that is not true, that blocks us from what God has said is the truth of who we are, and stop making bargains with the devil, because God is not going to make any more bargains. Let me read this last sentence in paragraph number 2, sentence number 6. If you do not want them on the basis of loss of peace, they will be removed from your mind for you. If you don't want the hallucinations, if you don't want the ego lies, they will be removed for you. And here's how that happens. When you decide to trust God and you begin to listen to the voice for God, that those boxes that I talked about in the room, they begin to dissolve. You don't have to physically actually take them out. This is paradox. Your allegiance to God's truth and acceptance of it and practice of it, living by it, makes the other things disappear. The ego, as it says in here, the ego does not ever, will never say, I'm not real. But when you get comfortable and you say all of the identity that is egoically created, that I'm not good enough, that I'm Catholic, that I'm Jewish, that I'm poor, that I'm rich, that I'm in charge, that I'm not good enough, that I'm better than anybody else, I'm superior, I'm inferior. They're not real, they're made up. You can change those like you can change your clothes. You can pick a different title. When we get comfortable that everything that comes and goes is of the ego, then we're creating space for what is true and eternal and cannot ever go away, cannot be taken away. Let's go to paragraph number 3. Paragraph number 3 says in sentence 1, every response to the ego is a call to war, and war does deprive you of peace. We got to stop being at war with ourselves. Every time you argue for your limitations, let me tell you a funny story. Every person that I've ever coached, in the beginning, they argue for their limitations. When I start saying things like, well, why don't you change your mind about that experience? Well, what do you mean? I can't just change my mind about that. It happened. It's like this. This was so hurtful. Arguing for their limitations. No, I'm not smart enough. I'm not capable enough. I'm not able to decide, no, I don't want to believe that anymore. Do you see how crazy that is? We argue for our limitations. I am not powerful. They have the power. I can't go get a job. I have to depend on this welfare program. I've been on it for 30 years, but I can't get a job. Really? Can you stand up and walk and do you go outside and do you go to the grocery store? Yeah, I go to the grocery store, use my food stamps. Well, if you can go to the grocery store, then you can go there and stock the shelves. Instead of emptying the shelves, it's just the same thing in reverse. So yes, you could get a job. You could do that thing. But the ego tells us, oh, no, I cannot. And once you start believing that the ego tells you that you cannot do what the ego doesn't want you to do, guess what? You're trapped. You're in a mental prison, limitations by your own beliefs. That's what is so amazing. And listen, I was there too. My God, I was inside it was a beautiful prison. It's very well decorated, by the way. But it was a prison nonetheless because there were so many things that I couldn't do. Or the reverse that I thought that I could do, but I really didn't know. But I was pretending, in my arrogance and my superiorness. All of those things, we have to empty our minds of all of those lies. They're not true. We are powerful beyond measure. In humility, that power is always going to be used for the greater good of all. As a matter of fact, when you understand the characteristic of honesty, it states in honesty inside of that paragraph that everything that you do in thoughts, in words, and actions will always be in alignment because they're going to be consistent for the greater good of all. You will not do anything that only helps yourself because you understand that we're all one. So you realize that what is good for me is good for all. This is why you treat your neighbors as you want to be treated, because you recognize the oneness. It's just such a beautiful thing. But every response in paragraph 3, every response to the ego is a call to war, and war does deprive you of peace. Yet in this war, there is no opponent. This is the reinterpretation of reality that you must make to secure peace, and the only one you need ever make. Those whom you perceive as opponents are part of your peace, which you are giving up by attacking them. Isn't that interesting? There's no opponent out there. The only opponent to our peace is within us. By deciding to hold other people responsible and say, you took my peace, you robbed me of my security. You people who are voting against my food stamps or whatever. Again, I am all for temporary assistance. All of us. All of us need a hand at some point. And that hand can look different for in lots of different ways. And I am grateful that this is such a rich country that we have the ability to provide assistance to our fellow brothers and sisters. I think that is beautiful. But the abuse of it is not. The abuse of it comes from egoic greed, egoic selfishness. There is no opponent out there that is telling you that you cannot get on your feet. The opponent is within telling you that somehow you are deserving of being kept at the mercy of other people. So do you know one of the things that I am so excited about is the government shutdown is causing a lot of people to look at, well, if they can give it to me, they can take it away. Do you know who's not going to take anything away? Is God. If you have a relationship with God, in your deservability, in your respect for yourself, you find your worth, you will do whatever it takes. And you will find people who will be like-minded. And those like-minded beings, because minds are joined, they're going to find each other and they're going to create collaborative opportunities. And they're going to create the farms and the gardening and the whatever, the sustenance that is necessary for living a very happy, joyful life. But the reason most people don't want that kind of a life is because it tends to be simple, because you don't value all that glitter and stuff and shiny things and fancy cars and bling bling and none of that. When you come to the place that you really value who you are as God created you, and you're no longer pretending that you get to bargain with God, and instead you're honoring what God said you deserve, and you believe it, and you say to the ego, you're not real. These thoughts that I somehow don't deserve it, I'm not believing that. Or that I deserve more than anybody else, I'm not going to believe that anymore. That is the makings of a happy dream, of collaboration and co-creation. We're moving in that direction. We're moving in the direction of the people we used to call crazy. I used to think, I remember being younger, the idea, what? People living together, communes, helping each other? Absolutely not. And it doesn't mean that in all communes everybody's abiding by the truth of God. There's a lot of abuse in communes too. When somebody begins to think that they know better than everybody else, and then communes turn into cults. You've got to understand that when you feel the peace of God, when you have trained yourself in the direction that the curriculum is taking us, is to be in service for the greater good of all. We will be helping each other. Anything that is currently greedy, anything that supports the haves and have nots is egoic. It is slowly being dismantled, but make no mistake, anything that favors one group over another is egoic. When we begin to move on things that are transparent, like the blockchain system, when we begin to see what everybody is getting can do, you're going to see a big shift because then everybody will be equally able to participate. And then when things are not hidden, then it's a matter of, do you want to participate in that? Do you want to educate yourself so you can learn about this or that or the other? But right now, so much is hidden because there is this belief that some get to have and some don't. And we participate in that through our mass consciousness, through our agreement. We bought into those stories that are not true. God does not bargain. All of us are created equal, endowed by God with the same inalienable powers to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Not only does our Constitution protect it, but it is the truth that is true always. And when you empty out your mind of all the things that are not true, you're going to be left with nothing but the awareness of your magnificence. That is the direction of the curriculum, to help us remember how worthy we are, because that is how we were created. Let me keep going. Sentence number 5 in paragraph 3. So how can you have what you give up? You share to have. Well, here we go again. Treat others as you want to be treated. You share to have, but you do not give it up yourself. When you give up peace, you are excluding yourself from it. This is a condition so alien to the kingdom that you cannot understand the state that prevails within it. I won't even get into the next paragraph. We'll pick up there next week. But every single time that we align with the truth that God is not bargaining about, we're all equal. Our mind has to be trained to see each other as equal. Our mind has to move out of looking at somebody as less than because they're on food stamps, but rather seeing them as just as capable. Just as capable. Don't buy into anybody's limitation, but also don't buy into anybody deserving more than anybody else. Just because, this whole thing about kings and queens, I found that when I was growing up, oh, I love all the kings and queens because I want to be a princess. So it was a lot of fun until I began to wake up and I began to go, why do we have kings and queens in Europe? Why do we have the Queen of England? Who appointed that? And then I began to study, just like I studied the formation of the Catholic Church, and I realized, oh, it had a starting point. It had a starting point in the year 325, the formation of the Catholic Church. What was there before that? There wasn't that. So then what is true? What was made up a couple thousand years ago, or what has been there eternally? Same thing with the monarchs. Who made that up? Do you realize that one person decided that they were king? There were no kings before there was somebody who decided that they were the king. And then everybody bows down to that. And then what do? We start sending them money and giving them power. You see how this works? The ego is all about money and power. I have it or I don't have it. Either way, two sides of the same coin. To create the haves and the have-nots, we have to have the illusion of separation. That's all well and good if we're just playing for fun. And we kind of are playing for fun. But when we play the game that is supposed to be for fun and haves and have-nots, and we take it serious, then we create suffering. Humanity is on the verge of waking up collectively because so many of us have been doing this work for a long time. This has been in the works. Listen, Jesus started this, Buddha started this, 2,500 years ago, Jesus 2,000 years ago. It's been going on little by little. We're standing up. to the insanity of the ego, and we're looking at the ego and saying to it, you're not real. It's a scary thing to tell the government you're not real, the medical establishment you're not real. But I'm going to recommend that you play in your own house in the safety of your own space. And if you're taking pills or if you're taking, or if you got a letter from the IRS or something demanding something, sit with it and look at it and say, you know what, you're not real. And feel whatever angst comes up. The angst is information that you were given. You should fear this thing. You better do what they tell you you're going to get in trouble. That's the information in those boxes we need to take out. And then sit with God. God, what do you want me to know is true about who I am so that I can deal with this thing from a place of recognizing that I deserve, that I respect myself enough to know the truth of who I am, that I know my worth. It's a beautiful thing when we begin to recognize that we are as God created us. When we become sustained by only the love of God, when we become clear that we're under no laws but God's, a sovereignty begins to get activated within us. A confidence, a certainty, a clarity, a determination, even and that's pride. It's a pride that says, I am worthy. And guess where that leads us? Right after pride comes the frequency of courage. In courage, you are not going to be afraid to stand up to that which you know is not of God. Thank goodness we have so many people who are doing that. A lot of people, that's their role. Many of us, that's not the role that we're here to play to go stand up against somebody else. For many of us, the role is to acknowledge the truth for ourselves and become that change. Become one who unplugs from so much of this matrix, becomes one who shows another way of doing things, who is collaborating with your neighbors who have a local food farm or whatever, and you are not buying into the rules and the regulations. At one time I used to think, oh, it's so great that the government is putting, is making sure that we are getting pesticides to kill the bugs that are harming our food. And then I realized, well, they're killing the bugs. Is it like a killer of only bad bugs? What about the good bugs? What about the bugs that are really helping to regenerate the soil that then produces the minerals that the plant's getting? If we don't have the bugs, we don't have the minerals. What are we eating? Are we eating empty stuff? So when you begin to start looking at the ecosystem as a whole, you begin to see that so many things are not loving in this world. And the reason they're not loving is because the ego's been running the world. This is the ego's playground. But you begin to tap into God within, then we become the new playground. We become the joyful beings. And as we are living life in a joyful way, respecting everybody else and abiding by God's laws, there's a certainty, a confidence. You can almost look at the Amish people and go, they know something the rest of us don't. Now they've got some rules and regulations that are still to me not fully completely in alignment with what I have come to know about God through the Course in Miracles. There's still rules and regulations there, but overall, there's a simplicity about life. There's a collaboration, a cooperation. It's not about the money. It's not about the power. It's about service, still a little bit of fear in there, but it's about primarily serving God in a beautiful, beautiful way. I want to be more Amish than I want to be anything else. If I were to tell you exactly who on this in this world right now is representing more of what I think is the way that I prefer to see life unfolding in 3D. But anyways, that's it. No more. The transmission is over. Click, done. Did anybody want to share? Did you get any nugget here? Anything that made you think, "Oh wow, look at that." Because this book is so filled. Course in Miracles is so filled with so much yumminess. I mean, it's just like, look at that, my book. And this is not my most marked up book.
Wow.
Ah,
Once again, so great to see you, Laina, and everybody else. You were saying something earlier, and my mind went to how I know when I was younger, my mother had ulcers, bleeding ulcers. And back in the day, I'm going like 50 years ago, they would just remove the bleeding ulcer. And then within a few months, it grew back. And with a lot of medical conditions, they're quick to take it out because they think that's the issue. But you were mentioning something earlier, I don't know the exact words, but it brought to mind if you don't get to the root of how you created the illness, it's just gonna like return. So you're kind of defeating itself.
Yeah. You keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Yeah,
And the medical world did the best that they could with what they had. So much of the training, if not all of the training in the medical establishment, does not deal with the power of the mind.
yeah.
It's not taught because if we all knew that our minds are powerful, do we even need a medical establishment? We wouldn't. So a lot of things would be self-defeating if we understood how powerful we are. And I believe, 100% believe that there has been a system, an agenda. Jesus spoke about this, that those who are in control, they don't want to give up control. And the way they stay in control is by helping us through all the ways that they do keep us in a place of not understanding how powerful we are. Because if we knew we were powerful, we knew the kingdom of heaven was within, we didn't have to kill Jesus. That was just like a fact. Let's help everybody remember that the kingdom of heaven is within and that they are powerful. And when we do that, the systems that funnel to the haves and the have-nots has to end. So
Mm,
the medical establishment, these doctors cannot be taught that all cause of everything is at the level of mind. Because if you teach that to somebody, well, guess what? You're not gonna be selling them any pills. If it's at the mind, it's not in the pill. And the course tells us that. And actually, there are doctors though who do practice that. I remember reading a while back, so I won't be able to quote the name because it's so out of my memory now. But there was a doctor I do remember that was in Arizona because I happened to have a friend in that area at the time, and I think she's the one who had sent me the article. But this doctor was a doctor who performed knee surgery. I guess he was I don't remember the term, but he performed knee surgery. And one of the questions that he asked of every patient, and this is what determined if he was going to do the surgery or not, he asked them, do you believe that this surgery is going to be helpful? Do you believe that my practice is going to help you? The ones who said yes, he would operate on them. The ones who said no, he wouldn't. Because he said, when they say no, I don't really fully believe, this is my last resort, but I don't think that there's any hope for me or there's any cure for it. He wouldn't operate on them because he knew that they had already decided this wasn't going to work for them. And so there are many out there. It's just not the norm. It's just the
mm,
rules are being written for those who practice the egoic way of control, and little by little, we'll start creating some rules for a little while that at least preserve the ability to choose from a non-egoic way, but that to choose from this feels right to me.
mm,
The whole thing with vaccines, for me, it should be totally complete. There should be no law that says that this is the way it should be. It should be, if it feels good, if you think it's going to work for you, get it. But if you have any aversion for it, that's your internal guidance system saying this is not for me.
mm.
And when we begin to respect everybody, the one who says, nope, this is not for me, they're using the power of their mind to make sure that they're not catching the thing that they're saying that they don't want. It's so simple.
And isn't it interesting with the medical field that all the insurance, I think 42 million, their insurance, they're not going to have medical insurance, and there's other issues they're taking away. Maybe this is happening for people to realize we don't need medical insurance. We never did need the medical. So isn't it interesting that it's actually occurring?
Yeah.
Like I kind of wonder about that.
Yeah. I absolutely believe and trust that it is all happening for a reason. When we
Yeah.
sold into buying medical insurance, all that is we were putting somebody else in the middle. And it sounded so good because we're going to use the group. to be able to do this. And then what happens? We are all expecting insurance and we all are trained into that we have to have it. And then we pay for it no matter what. And then the prices start going up and we have no control over it. And now, because your mind is trained into you have to have the insurance, you'll mortgage your house. You'll get yourself into, a pickle. And if you can't do it, then you suffer so much because you're so afraid. None of that is loving. That is not the will of God. However, it is the human will to have those experiences. And what is happening is that we're seeing the result of our misuse of the power of our mind. We have bought into becoming victims and enslaved into systems by those who are unlovingly doing things. For what reason? Can you all
Money.
agree with me? Power and money. We've got to get really simple, really clear about how the ego operates. The ego is not our friend. It is not our friend. The Course in Miracles made that so easy so clear for me to understand. We have to wake up and realize God created us to love and support and uplift one another. We got to get back to humans helping humans.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for that comment. I love and appreciate you all so much. And this was episode 221, and the rest of them are on my YouTube. And if you want to join the Awareness Academy, I'd love to have you there. There is a link in the description of every one of my videos. Love you all. Hey, Natalia. Bye-bye.
Love you, Laina. Thank you so much
Bye, sweetie.
uh, on uplifting and supporting and loving when joining with you.
Thank
Bye.
you, honey. Bye-bye.